Life Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
And welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Del Vecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corey Sirota, clinical social worker and psychotherapist, specializing in grief and loss. Matt, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Are you going to watch the Stanley Cup, the playoffs?
One, I'm impressed you're actually asking me about a hockey question, Corey. Very, very good.
I gotta shock you sometimes.
Actually, you know what? I am. I'm a Habs fan, but I think for everyone, this is just a bit of a change, a bit of a relief. So August 1st, 8 p.m., Pittsburgh Penguins and Habs are going to start it off with the playoffs. Very much looking forward to that. Less than 2 weeks away. So many good series in the playoffs in the NHL coming up. And there's two Canadian teams that are going to be going at it as well. The Calgary Flames and the Winnipeg Jets, who also happen to be starting on August 1st. They're going to be on at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So another person that I know is looking forward to that Calgary Flames series is Chris Snow. Chris is the assistant general manager with the Calgary Flames Hockey Club. A little over a year ago, at the age of 38 years old, Chris was diagnosed with ALS. With his unwavering spirit and support of his family, his employer, and the medical community, Chris has been defying the odds. He's been kind enough to join us today from Calgary to tell his story. Chris, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I certainly appreciate that introduction.
Well, no, thank you, Chris. I always give it's Calgary people that give us a shot, because the last time the Stanley Cup was raised on Montreal ice was Calgary Flames. So thanks a lot, Chris. Really appreciate that.
I think that's the last hockey game I watched was a replay of that game, since that's all they've had to show. So I am very familiar with that game right now.
We cannot forget Lanny McDonald and his mustache hoisting that Stanley Cup on our ice.
He still looks the same.
Oh, really? Well, you know what? First of all, thank you for joining us here. You were diagnosed with ALS just over a year ago. Can you bring us back to that day when you found out?
Yeah, it's an indelible day that feels like it was yesterday. I often say that a process of elimination diagnosis. And I went through that process of eliminating nerves in my arm and in my neck and other potential causes. And about 6 weeks into that process, in June, a doctor looked at me after testing the functionality of my nerves and muscles and said, I think this is the beginning of ALS. And instantly, my wife broke into tears, and I thought this cannot be happening again, as it's already happened to my dad, two of his brothers, and a young cousin of mine at age 28. And you perceive that in that moment as nothing but a death sentence.
Wow, it's quite, just hearing you speak about it is really quite overwhelming, and I can't even imagine what it was like to get those or hear those words coming out of the doctor's mouth. And you just mentioned there's a family history, and so also being totally overwhelming. What was your family's reaction to hearing that you now were diagnosed?
Yeah, well, we've lived this, and so we saw my dad and both of his brothers pass away in a span of essentially 9 months in each of their cases, from diagnosis to death. And they experienced some symptoms before that, I imagine, that led each of them at some point to finally go see a doctor and the right doctor. And so their reaction was simply that we don't have a lot of time, and we need it, as my wife put it last year, we need to make this a summer to last a lifetime, because it may need to be. And yet, the most terrific and offsetting aspect of it was that in the moments after this doctor diagnosed me, he said, there is a clinical trial that you have to enroll in, and it's the most promising thing I've seen come along. And if I have any good fortune in all of this, it's that the genetic cause that I have, which is called SOD1, that gene was the first discovered cause of genetic ALS, familial ALS. And so researchers, scientists got their hands and their minds on that first. And thankfully, there's a trial that I'm in that was already by that point in its third phase, which meant the dose was higher, the regularity of that dose was greater. There was no waiting period to go from the trial portion to receiving, for certain, a non-placebo drug at the end of the trial. And so while devastating, walking out of there, I felt like I had hope, and I had perceived this as a no-hope scenario.
Talking with Chris Snow, diagnosed with ALS at 38 years old. He is the assistant general manager with the Calgary Flames. And Chris, I want to expand a little bit on this gene therapy. You were part of this test. You didn't know if you were getting the real drug or not, but it must have been. I can't imagine knowing that your family who had experienced this, your uncles and your dad, from diagnosis to death after 9 months. I'm sure there were a lot of prayers and hope, but here you are. This is a year and a couple of months right now, and something has to be working here. I just want to clarify one thing. This seems to be genetic ALS. Already we're getting some texts, and you weren't, in terms of I know you're athletic earlier on, but did you experience concussions that could have contributed to this, or do you think this is truly genetic?
No, I would say that it's beyond any shadow of a doubt, it's genetic. I was a very average high school athlete, nothing beyond that. For that matter, golf, totally non-contact, was one of the two sports I played in high school. And they do a genetic test before enrolling you in the study to be certain that you are, in fact, a carrier of that gene. And then they roll that family history into the evaluation of your candidacy. So those are steps that had to be taken. And the gene that I have accounts for only 2% of all ALS cases. So they felt, certain that that was the cause in my case.
So I understand that you had to physically adapt because there are some physical challenges, particularly your right arm. How have you been managing that?
Yeah, I've managed it really well. This began in the outer half of my right hand, and by the time I was into the trial, had, for all intents and purposes, taken my hand. I couldn't make a fist. I really couldn't even hold, say, a bottle of water. And my forearm muscle had atrophied significantly. And what they expected was that it would travel up my arm from there, and it hasn't. I can still hold my almost 9-year-old in my right arm using the strength of my upper arm and shoulder. I found that having one hand is not nearly a challenge I thought it would be. I still bike. I still coach my son's hockey team and shoot a puck with adaptations to create some bracing and some artificial support strength in that wrist. I can't cut food. I can't tie shoes. But outside of those two things, I can't really think of a challenge in the day where I can't do it. And that's been just terrific. Now, 2 hands, that would be a big problem. But one, I have found, you don't really need to write that much. And when I do, I write slow with my left hand. And it's funny, it kind of looks like you're right-handed writing. I suppose the brain is wired to form the same shapes and figures when you write. But I, for the most part, avoid writing and type a little slower. But it's not really, I wouldn't even call it a disability. It's just a slight complication in some instances.
Amazing, having had to adjust. Hey, Chris, you probably wish you were a lefty playing ball when you were younger days.
Yeah, I know. You know what? It's funny you say that, because if I had been a lefty all along, I really could have, kind of hid it from people for a while, though that really wasn't my intention, given how public I have been. And I joke that the world's kind of gone my way. Like, I couldn't shake hands, and now nobody shakes hands.
There you go.
It's part of that amazing attitude that you have, Chris. And one of the things, you are an inspiration to many Canadians and around the world. You've started an ALS awareness and fundraising campaign called #Trickshot for Snowy. And Chris, we have to head out to traffic, but we want to hear a lot more about this amazing initiative. But
Live Fund Rehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corey Sirota, along with my co-host Matt Del Vecchio, and we are talking to Chris Snow. Despite being diagnosed with ALS, he is defying all the odds and living his best life. And if you heard the first half of this interview, you know what I am talking about. My gosh, Chris, your attitude is just incredible. Right before we went out to traffic, Matt mentioned something about an ALS awareness and fundraising campaign that you've initiated called #Trickshot for Snowy. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We first off felt great support from Canadians donating to the Flames Foundation and to something we set up with the University of Miami, where I was diagnosed, to fund research solely toward a cure. And as of the start of June, we had raised about $140,000, and yet a lot of that had been in the first couple of months of December, January, and into February. And the organization, the Flames, had a terrific idea, which was a play on the ice bucket challenge with something new and different, which was if people can come up with any sort of creative, quote-unquote, trick shot, athletic or otherwise, and post that to social media, and ideally make a small donation and challenge two other people, then we had a chance to really reach a big audience. And one of our tricks actually was done by Paul Byron of the Canadians. Paul and his wife Sarah are terrific people. Paul played here for a while, and he did something out in his driveway. And we've had the band Pearl Jam, their lead singer Eddie Vedder, did a really neat trick, and then their foundation donated $5,000. We've raised about $53,000 last month plus, with over 300 trick shots across all of the major North American professional sports, and then down to a woman or a guy in a province in Canada or a city in the U.S. who said, "Hey, I just want to do one of these," and tag a couple of my friends and make a donation. So it's been really humbling and exciting to see that trend and to see it continue beyond the ALS Awareness Month of June.
I love it, and I actually even understand what it means.
No, you know what? Good for you, Chris. And so that's #Trickshot for Snowy, and it's the number 4, #Trickshot for Snowy. Google it. You're going to see some incredible trick shots and such a great initiative. Good on you, Chris, for initiating that. Now, I have to, your wife, Kelsey, Chris, has been an absolute rock for you and your family. She's posted some heartwarming and inspiring blogs and videos. Can you tell us about some of them?
Yeah, she and I actually met as writers. I was a writer at the Boston Globe in 2005, and she came as a summer intern. And that was her career until we had our son almost 9 years ago. And so what's really brought her a level of, I think, level of expression and a level of coping is to write about this. And I always knew she was a great writer, but when she's especially passionate about the subject, and never more so than now, it brings out her talent, I think, in a big way. And so what she's done under the website blog of Kelsey, Kelsie, snowwrites.com, is to chronicle this. And she's written, I think, a dozen or so entries that speak to how we process this emotionally, or when I've had a change or a progression physically, just taking people through that experience. And I think it's brought a lot of, from the feedback we've gotten, it's brought comfort to families who are living with this, families who have lost someone to this, that others feel the same things, that there may be a cure that's coming. And I think for us, it's allowed us to communicate to people close to us, like friends and coworkers, as well as strangers, what's going on, how we feel, how we'd like to be treated. And I think that's made this easier, because the association with ALS is only negative and steeply negative and a bad outcome. And so when we can get ahead of those questions with hopeful answers, it's helped us, and from the feedback, it's helped others as well.
Without a doubt, that is such a fantastic way of helping cope and manage through the situation. We are talking with Chris Snow, who has been diagnosed with ALS, and despite that diagnosis, he's defying all sorts of odds and really truly living your best life. So how about your kids? How have you been communicating with them?
Well, they were our greatest concern, as you can imagine, that, being diagnosed, I would have to go home and tell them a story that did not have a good ending. And I recall being given a book at my diagnosis that was kind of a children's book that said my dad has ALS. And I flipped through those pages and you see this, artistic rendering of a dad who goes from healthy to in a wheelchair to fully stricken, and I just threw the book away. And
Good for you.
I thought, I don't want anything to
Yeah.
do with this, and that's not going to be me, at least not for a long time. And what's been wonderful is they're young enough that they have not shown real fear or anxiety or true awareness. And the other part is because I am basically the same, because I coached my son all year, none of our patterns or activities as a family changed. They see me as very much the same person as I was. And they're aware of my dad and my uncles, and that this is what happened to them. But they view this medication I'm on as I do, but they view it even more so as the whole difference, that this is completely different than what happened to Grandpa Bob and what happened to his brothers. And my gratitude for that is immense, because those discussions would have been just heartbreaking, and if we have to have them, they will be, but that time is not now.
This Chris Snow happens to be the assistant general manager of the Calgary Flames, and I'm sure you're getting all ready for the playoffs. Talking about his diagnosis with ALS, 2 young children, and Kelsey writing those blogs. I tell you, there's this one that you simply just have to Google, and Chris Snow or Kelsey Snow, and where you're doing your push-ups, Chris, and very, very inspirational, because who would have thought you'd be doing push-ups? That was not what doctors were saying, and you've got I think it's your daughter or son on your back, is it?
My daughter, yeah, and her expression is great. She's smiling and she's pointing down at me doing them, and I think the video is 3 push-ups long, and she's kind of a peanut. She probably weighs 40 pounds. But my wife stopped tasting, and I said, "Hey, I could have kept going there." So,
Keep it rolling.
Right.
Keep it rolling.
that was great. Like anything I do physically that we post, I find gets an unbelievable reaction, and when I'm in those moments, I feel healthy, and that's when I can let the mental side of it go and not worry and not drift.
Well, good for you, Chris. We want to thank you very much for taking some time and joining us from Calgary. We want to wish you courage and strength and lots of love from the community. How can people donate, Chris?
They can go to calgaryflames.com/snowystrong. On there, you can read a little bit about us. You'll see the 2 options to donate to either the Flames Foundation, where we personally will then designate the specific best research institutes to donate to, or you can go to donate to the University of Miami.